Hello, humanity, and welcome back to the We Are Not Lonely podcast. It's been such a long time, and I'm excited for this. Oh my god. It's been so long since I've spoken to a mic and heard my voice like this. It feels amazing. Alright? So, I began this whole thing by saving my project, and it just took me back to the very first episode and what happened. I'm not gonna reveal it. Maybe one day, not yet, because I don't have the files anymore and the person who does is no longer with us. Anyway, moving past that, I wanted to talk about what I've been doing while I've been away. There's so much that's happened, dude. So, okay, let me begin where I left off in the last episode. I was speaking about chaos and how it was overwhelming my life. And that's not something I should be doing, to be honest, because I just realized that speaking about things is an easy way to actualize them. I mean, it's kind of debatable, to be honest. I'm kind of going on a tangent here. I'm going on something else. I'm talking about the other podcast. I'm choosing to go on a tangent this time because I have become very aware. Feels so good to be back. Anyway, tangent number one. Be careful about what you speak because the universe is listening. Alright? That's the first lesson I think you should know. Moving on. I was going to tell you about what I've been doing all this while, right? So I have been away for a considerable amount of time. I put out the last podcast sometime in August of 2023, and then I just dipped. The podcast was about chaos, and life became incredibly chaotic because I wasn't able to deal with all of the things that were happening. I finally did get back to things. I got back on top of things. I've been working all this while on creating a system. I've been delving deep into productivity. And what can I say? It's bearing fruit. I'm so excited! I apologize about that sudden volume increase. Hopefully, it'll be taken care of in the master. We shall see. So, it's been a wild journey since we left. I've been doing a bunch of things. I've been traveling. I actually went to Nepal. I left the country for the first time in my life. And I decided to go to Nepal. I stopped by in Kolkata. I visited the Devi temple. There's a temple, Kali Ghat, I believe. It's quite famous. I believe Swami Vivekananda and Swami Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and all were kind of related to that temple. I'm not particularly sure, but it's a temple dedicated to Kali Ghat. So kind of obvious, right? But then after that, I went to Nepal, and it was just 10 days in Nepal, and it was such an amazing trip. I've never done this kind of a solo trip before, right? And this was my first time. And I learned so much about myself and about other people. At one point, there was this elderly gentleman who just called me a little politician. I don't know what he saw. I don't even know why he said that, but it was fun. I met a lot of people, I made a lot of friends, a lot of acquaintances, touch and go. I suppose you could say that. This was around the time that the whole situation in Israel and Gaza took off. I At that time I was in a hostel, so I was sharing my room obviously because I didn't have the room to myself. But I had a bunch of Israeli roommates, and I could just see their world crumble and all of that. Now, I'm not so naive as to wish there was no war. I understand the dark side of the human psyche, but can't really hurt to wish for more good and peace in the world, can it? This is old Sanskrit prayer. Sarve bhavantu sukinaha, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhavet. May all beings be happy. Such a beautiful prayer, dude. Yes, I was telling you about what happened. I was in Nepal for a while, for 10 days, and I flew back to Mysore and slowly fell back into the routine of getting my life in order. I did carry my camera and all of that. I did shoot a decent amount of content. I've got a bunch of things to go through. But in the process, I kind of realized that I've lost a great deal of my content making, content creating knowledge. It wasn't like I was the best, okay? But I was getting somewhere, especially with the last couple of videos. But now it feels like I'm back at square one, starting from scratch. And in a lot of ways, it's good because I don't mind being a beginner. I don't mind making a fool out of myself. It's completely okay. I'm gonna enjoy this. I'm gonna learn what it means to put up good cinematography, make cinematic and beautiful videos. Hopefully, yeah? That's the plan. No, scratch that. There is no hopefully. I'm gonna make beautiful works of art through video as well. And that's the journey. So the main thing I've been doing ever since I got back is trying to distill this whole philosophy of productivity. I've been trying to understand what exactly it means to become productive, to structure my life in a method that allows me to be the most productive and get the most. One second. The mosquito! No. I felt something biting at my foot, and it was a mosquito. I don't like mosquitoes. They make me sick. I mean, they bite me and make me sick sometimes. That's what I mean. Anyway, I'm going to leave that in there for posterity. This is going to be a one take, one shot podcast. I don't even think I'm going to edit it at all. This is just going to be raw dogging it the full time. Right. So, I was talking to you about productivity, and I was rudely interrupted by Mr. Mosquito, who is looking to suck my blood. I will suck your blood. He tried, he succeeded, and then he got his plans ruined. Anyway, back to productivity. So the entire idea was understanding what I was doing wrong in my productivity thing. Because I've stopped bullet journaling. It's been a very long time since I last bullet journaled. It just dropped off. The habit just dropped off. But I've kept on top of my to-dos. I didn't really have a project management system. And I've gotten to this point where I've filled nearly 4 journals. I'm on my 3rd journal. I've complete, yeah. So I am on my 3rd journal. And this is in the last 3 months. I've completed an entire journal, then I completed another one, which isn't really a journal, but it's kind of evolving. It's becoming a commonplace book. It's becoming an idea park. These are 2 ideas that I just came across quite recently, and I've been incorporating them. It's a journal, yes, but it's also a place where I just collect things that are important to me. A bunch of things. And things seem to be going well so far. But you never really know, do you? I've kind of hit this, not a peak. I feel like I've reached the peak and I can see. Actually, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. I think that I've reached a peak in my knowledge and understanding of productivity. Because I've just completed reading a couple of books and implementing a huge part of them. I've got one entire process down, and I've been refining that one particular process. So for those of you who are not aware about my entire process, I'm going to try to define it right now. I do a mixture of this thing called Getting Things Done by David Allen. That's one of the first things that I read. That's one of the first serious books on productivity that I actually read from start to finish. And then there was the bullet journal method, which I've actually been using for a very long time to track my activities and to schedule my day. Not really schedule my day, but structure my to-dos and track mostly. That's what my bullet journal has been about. And I hope, no, scratch that. No hoping. I will be putting up a video about my initial bullet journal. I'm really excited to share it because this was a journal that I literally built myself. I designed the dot grid system because I couldn't find a dot grid notebook, or it was too expensive. It was too expensive for me at that time. Yes, I know dot grid books are cheap, but I was cheaper at that point of time, right? So I wasn't willing to spend on buying like a 700 rupee dot grid journal. So I just printed an entire stack of computer paper with a dot grid that I designed on my computer, and then I bound them all. I learned how to bookbind. I did have to spend like $100 for cardboard, but that lasted for several books. So it was a win for me. And I also learned to bind and create my own books in the way. So that was my first ever bullet journal, and that's how I started on my journey to peak productivity. It starts a long time ago. I don't want to get into that right now. Actually, you know what? Why not? But let's figure it out. Let me finish this thing about the bullet journal first. So, bullet journaling started somewhere in the 2020 time. Yeah, sometime around COVID. I stopped bullet journaling in my old bullet journal by around 2021. I picked it up. I dropped it sometime in 2022 when I moved to Hyderabad. It was too much of a workload to maintain all of that. Time was incredibly precious at that point. It was a very scarce resource, so I just dropped it. Bullet journaling became a kind of a luxury, which is sad, I know. But I kept journaling. And instead of regular journaling, I would just write things down and I would post them. That's when I started my blog, by the way. It's still there. You can go check it out. A bunch of musings just put together. I was just venting to my phone, and it was incredibly therapeutic. It also helped me get my thoughts together in written form, and that was the beginning of my falling in love again with writing process. So once Hyderabad was done, I tried to pick up bullet journaling again, but it never really took off. There was this huge phase where I attempted, stopped. It was too much chaos. I didn't quite have a system. I kept having to do a reset. And I'm going to talk about that more in another video, where initially there was this day when my system would completely break down and I would have to stop, salvage, reset, and then move on again. That was because I wasn't reflecting, I wasn't taking time off to plan exactly what I had to do. I wasn't maintaining my system. And I realized that now. And it got too much, so I dropped it. I also tried a bunch of apps to help me streamline the process, but they never really took off. I tried Notion for a while. I tried, I think, Todoist, but it felt too mechanical and I just stuck to doing things on paper. That's changed, by the way. Like recently, the whole realization that I might have hit my first peak in productivity. I do see other mountains. This is just the beginning of a journey. I do see other mountains to climb and keep climbing, and then eventually create a launch pad and take off into space and to become the ultimate productivity master. But yeah, I digress. So the idea right now is I have a couple of apps that I use to keep me on track. I'm still only on the first app, to be honest. There's this one app that I found called Workflowy. I'm testing it out. It's just to maintain my projects. I still do everything on paper. I'm still gonna print it out when I'm done, but it's so much easier to organize things digitally. I just realized that. And being a 21st century human, I shouldn't be shying away from the digital. I should be trying to use digital to make my life easier. And that's part of the whole reason why I stopped using Notion. And I'll talk about that more. But if I had to summarize, every time I opened up Notion, I was filled with dread about the huge system that I would have to build. And I didn't want to take it a step at a time. It was also at a point where I was designing a system to manage my life, and that took up a huge amount of time. Kind of procrastinating work by working on my system. But at that point of time, my thought was once I have this, everything falls in place. It didn't. It took much longer. I still had to do what I was doing every single day. But my point was that Notion made me nervous to engage with it. Every time I opened it up, I felt overwhelmed by the complexity of the software, about the things that I had to learn, etc. Workflowing, on the other hand, is just so simple. Drop down text after drop down text and massive bullet points everywhere. And it really works for me because I've been bullet journaling for such a long time that bullet points are second nature. I just summarize everything in a neat bullet point and I put it there. And if I want to, I can go deeper. And it goes infinitely, which is kind of what my mind works as well. And that's the kind of app I've been hoping to find and work on for a very long time. And recently I was scrolling through a Reddit thread trying to find an app for a second brain. And I'll talk about that as well. I'm going to have to talk about the second brain because that's literally what I'm going to be talking about next. And I looked through a bunch of the recommendations. I've narrowed it down to Obsidian and Workflowy. Workflowy primarily to actually work, to organize all my projects, all the things that I have to do, and Obsidian as a second brain, just as a note taking, not as a note taking app, but somewhere where I take my notes and I throw it onto the computer and I let the connections do its thing. It's still not at that phase. I still have to build a database of material for Obsidian to work with and make its cross connections. I have no idea about what Obsidian is supposed to do, but I've decided to replace Evernote with Obsidian because I am sick and tired of Evernote. I heard a lot of bad things about it and I haven't actually opened the app myself for months. And that's when I realized, hey, this is a problem. Also, every time I open up, it prompts me to buy an overpriced premium plan, which I did not appreciate. Apparently, I can't create any more new notes, and that was sad because I've hit the limit on notes that I could create. Apparently, it's really sad to see Evernote fall, and I'm not the only person who's talking about this. Evernote is out, Obsidian is in, at least for me, and I refuse to pay to get my data stolen. Yeah. So that's how Evernote is out. And it's kind of sad because I started my journey with Evernote back in 2012. I know. I was one of the early adopters of the program. I have notes from back then on Evernote. I have song lyrics from back when I was in the choir singing songs. I would just type it all into Evernote and then store it there. And it's sad to see that it's no longer going to be a part of my life. I think one of the main problems was it tried to do too much and it destroyed itself. It tried to do too much and it became nothing. Like, it was a note taking app. It was a brilliant note taking app. But after the whole interest in the productivity space, and I believe Evernote was also acquired by another company, they tried to make it more of a collaborative tool, something like for teams to work on together. And ever since, it's just become annoying. Like, I could see the price shoot up Personal Evernote wasn't this expensive. It was a lot cheaper at one point of time. And I kind of regret not getting it at that time, but it's okay. It's okay. Evernote is gone. And this is a real problem, I guess, for freemium apps. I don't know how things are gonna work exactly, but yeah, that's the situation. So, moving on, Workflowy is my project management system app, and Obsidian is my knowledge management system app. And that's incredible that a person requires all of this, but such is the complexity of the modern world. We have so much, we are inundated with so much knowledge, with so much information, and we have no idea to sort through it. And that's something I've been realizing recently ever since I sort of unplugged from the digital side of things. I'm trying to cut down on my consumption. In fact, I've largely reduced the amount of time I spend on my phone. Primarily, I would spend a lot of time just reading a bunch of manhwa first thing in the morning. And today was actually a day that I did it for the first time in a very long time. It felt kind of nice, I'm not gonna lie, but it's not something that I want to do right now. I'm gonna focus my energy on other things. On other things, I specifically mean getting my life together, building wealth, becoming filthy rich. Because, yeah, let's face it, dude. I want to be rich. I don't see the whole problem with being rich. I don't see the problem with being wealthy as long as you help people with your wealth and you don't use it to gain an unfair advantage and all of that nonsense. Like, wealth is not a zero sum game. I don't understand. You can create enough wealth for everybody to have abundance. It's just small minded people playing stupid status games that want to shit on people who have a lot of wealth. And let's face it, we still have not found a decent way to redistribute wealth. We have not found a good way for us to redistribute wealth. We should tax the rich, the extremely rich, the 1%. We should tax them. Yes, 100%. Back in Rome, I believe that being taxed was a privilege. We need to figure out a better system and make changes to our system on the way, man. That's what I did. Like, speaking of and getting back to productivity, I just went on my rant about the world and all of its problems and how to fix it, and I'm not gonna get back to productivity. So crazy, huh? So, speaking of productivity, I have come to realize that my system failed when I tried to do it all at once, right? For example, when I tried to make Notion happen, it didn't happen primarily because one, it has a steep learning curve. Let's acknowledge that. Notion has a steep learning curve and it's also incredibly slow at times. That's a major issue. Okay? Now, apart from these, it's got a ton of positives. But I just wanted to point out these two reasons specifically why Notion didn't work for me. Along with that, my personal problem was the fact that I tried to organize my life at get go. I wanted everything that I needed at a fingertip on Notion right now. It got to a point where I was spending more time trying to figure out my system than working and using my system to reach my goals. And that's not the point. That's not how it should have been. Anyway, I just realized like how my journey through productivity happened. For example, even journaling, right? Let's talk about my entire journey with journaling itself. I started journaling back in 2012. I used to capture back in 2012. I didn't have a dedicated system to it, but I was using Evernote on my phone to note things. And funny thing, I had the Samsung Galaxy Note at that point. The Note 2 specifically was such a great phone. I miss it sometimes. So powerful, dude. For its time, it was a flagship and it was so powerful. It was such a beautiful. Anyway, let me stop falling in love. I should probably do tech reviews. I don't know. It'll be fun. Anyway, getting back. So I used to capture just random notes in my Galaxy Note 2 back then in Evernote. And I can see part of that there. I didn't have a system to manage all of that together, but it's okay because it took about 12 years for this entire thing to reach clarity, for it to mature. Imagine that. 12-year-old journey. It's a 12-year journey. This productivity journey was a 12-year-old journey. Wow. It just blew my mind for a second. Because I can say that. And there are kids that are 12 years old. And I've had a journey that was 12 years old in the making. Wow, that is just blowing my mind, dude. Anyway, getting back to journaling. I used to dream journal back in the day. I attempted to journal back in school, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I just saw all the dear diary nonsense and I didn't quite know what to note. Thinking back, it would have been an amazing thing if I had this knowledge back then. But I didn't, which is really sad. I should probably fix that for the future generation. Note taking, system, organization, these are things that should be taught to us in school, man. It's incredibly sad that it isn't. But anyway, yeah. So I would draw and journal back in school. I would just write down things about how I felt, or I would write things down at random points in my life. At that point, I was also trying to write a book. I actually went through multiple books. I wrote something like a science fiction, loosely based on this game called Dark Colony, about humans going to Mars and finding a powerful petrochemical over there. I forget the specific name, and then getting attacked by aliens. And that was the whole crux of it. Then after that, I also wrote this loosely based on Iranian storyline, because this was back in 2006. I've written about 4 to 5 incomplete novels. 2 to 3 of them were fiction. I would erase it and write again and again, and I didn't quite understand that I was just supposed to keep writing. Another thing that would have been incredibly useful back then, because I had so many ideas as a child and they were so wacky. But yeah, enough about the complaining more about this. So I would write, but I didn't have a general system to that, and I wasn't consistent, which is the main thing, which is the most important thing about journaling. Eventually, I got to this point where I started dream journaling. I started recording my dreams in my notebooks, and I've actually got quite a few of my dream journals from back when I was writing them. It's it's a huge stack. And once I was done with my college, I would just use my old notebooks to record my dreams. And once it was done, I'd use another, and it was incredible. I have journals. I have a journal from 2013, 12, 13, 14. So it's almost 10 to 11 years old. I haven't been dream journaling as much recently. I need to get back in the habit. It would be a brilliant commonplace notebook if I had my dreams right there as well. And that's something I'm working on. It's just that I don't remember most of my dreams anymore. I have to get back into that process. And I should. And I will. So anyway, this consistency thing happened when I got serious about dream journaling. I was doing a bunch of other things at that particular point in time, but I wasn't really recording most of that. I was very focused on my dreams. Eventually, time passed. I completed my BCom. I took a year off, and then I decided to do my master's. And that's when I heard about goal setting and what to do and figuring out all of the big picture things. It happened at the inauguration, the freshers day, I guess, the day that we met the staff. It was quite the experience, because until then I never quite had this kind of thinking in my life, which is weird because at that particular point I was a person who had completed a bachelor's degree and I still didn't know how to plan my life. But anyway, once I got to my MBA, I think the most important reason why this particular thing had to happen is because the functions of a manager include planning. The others are organizing, staffing, directing, and leading. Poscal, yeah. POSCL. Actually, planning, organizing, staffing, and leading. Something like that. I might be missing a couple of letters in there. But the first step is planning. And our professors decided to teach us how to plan. And I'm incredibly grateful to them because that's what happened. So, sometime into my MBA, I decided to get therapy because I needed to do some personality development and a bunch of other things. Definitely had some issues with my personality and my shadow at that point, and I learned to integrate all of that over time. That's when I went to therapy and I had this whole situation happen again, and that's when I had my first brush with scheduling and time blocking. It was an interesting experience, and that's kind of what laid the foundation for who I am right now. I got through my MBA and I breezed through it, especially my third and fourth sem. I just breezed through all of my exams. I would actually, at that point of time, during my exams, I was sleeping 9 hours a day. I would barely touch my notebook. I would just glance through it because I had finished the entire studies ages ago and I wasn't breaking my head to become ranked number one at that point. And it wasn't also like feasible at that point to break my head to become ranked number one. It would have been a lot of work to catch up. So I just decided to chill and cruise. And it was such a great decision because I got to enjoy myself. I was playing League of Legends competitive during my MBA exams. And I graduated with a first class in distinction. First class with distinction, whatever. 8 point something GPA. Very close to a 9. I decided not to go for the 9 because it was too much of a hassle. I could have, if I had planned everything earlier, if I had known about planning earlier, I could have planned for a 9 something GPA, but I didn't. No, I'm not regretting it. I could still do my PhD at any point. I did go on to do my Jyotisha after that, and that particular point of time was when my greatest evolution in self-learning happened, because once I was done with my MBA, I was faced with this question of, oh, what next, right? And 5 years ago, it's 6 years now, but let's just say 5 years because I was done with my MBA sometime in July, and it's just 6 to 7 months since July 2023 passed, where it's been 5.5 years. Okay, fine, I'll give you that. 5.5 years ago, I sat down at my friend's house in Coog and I was thinking to myself, what do I want to do next? What now? What kind of a person do I want to become? And I heard my professor's words ring through my head. Planning is the first job of a manager. If you don't plan, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. Yeah, I remember this. It was such an important thing because we would keep making jokes about it, but at least that much has sunk into our brains. You know, no matter how much we made fun of this particular fact, we did make it a point to make plans after that. So, I planned for the next 5 years. I remember writing things down at some point. It's somewhere. I can't find it anymore. But I wrote things down. I wrote a letter to myself. And among the things were these desires to study the Shastras, that is basically the Vedas. I wanted to study Jyotisha. This was around the time that I had an incredible interest in Jyotisha because I had a wonderful experience with a wonderful person. And I'll talk about that eventually. I hope to bring him on the podcast sometime. It'll be amazing for him to interact with all of y'all. And I mean, just for him to share his knowledge with you would be incredible. So, yes, so that happened. I was able to plan out what I wanted. Basically, study the Shastras, study the Bhagavad Gita. Basically, I wanted to study the Vedas. And the interesting thing was how my life unfolded after that. I also did have a lot of interest in martial arts at that point. Martial arts were an incredibly important part of my life. And I had written down that I should learn the sword. This is in 2018. And I eventually did. 2019, I started studying the sword, which is amazing if you think about it. Wait, 2019? Yeah. It had been 3 years and I eventually started learning the sword. It was such an amazing journey. I learned weapons by Master finally acquiesced. He was like, okay, fine, this guy is incredibly dedicated, focused. I think I can entrust it to him. And I don't want to be that guy, but I'm incredibly grateful to my master because I am one of the only people that he has chosen to teach weapons to. Thank you. Thank you, Ajay Master. I'm so grateful. I didn't quite know it at that time, but I was laying the seeds for my future. Who knew back in 2019 choosing to learn swords would take me to Hyderabad where I would be teaching students? I didn't quite think I'd become a martial arts teacher at that point. I didn't quite think I'd become what I am right now. But I had planned for it. I hoped to reach it and I took action. I didn't just write down the goals, right? I didn't just write down the goals. I took concrete actions. So I ended up joining a Veda class. I ended up joining a Jyotishya course. I pursued martial arts with all the energy and vigor that I could muster. I relentlessly asked my master if I could train with him for weapons. And over time, all of those things became true. So yeah, that was my first brush with actual planning. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was doing a lot of self-study. I reached out to this one particular person called Alex Hain, modern monk. Excuse me. And he was the one who suggested this whole idea of, hey, if you have a goal, it's not enough to keep it as a goal. You should break it down into a daily habit. And he gave me an example of, do you want to write a book? If you want to write a book, actually, he asked me for one of my goals, right? And I said, I want to write a book at some point. And he said, don't focus on the book. Focus on the next 500 words. And that's what I did. And I'd like to let you know that I have my first draft. I mean, it's actually the 0th draft. It's not available for public viewing because it's just a hodgepodge of notes. I have my 0th draft of my first ever novel, just hodgepodge in there. And I've taken a printout. It reached like 69, 70,000 words, dude. I'm so grateful that all of this could happen. And it all began with that first letter to myself, planning what I wanted to do. Incredible. And now I've gone through all of that. I've refined my system, relentlessly refined my system. And I've kind of gotten to this point. I primarily follow. So if I had to describe my system, right? If I had to describe exactly what I'm doing in productivity to manage my productivity, etc., I would describe it as a mix of getting things done. I'm using the methodology of getting things done. I'm using the process of bullet journal. I am also using a second brain. I'm using the app Workflowy to manage my methodology, to manage my projects. I'm using Obsidian to build a second brain. And for those people out of this whole productivity thing, I guess they would have no idea what I just said, right? Like my project management system is GTD. The app that I use to manage that system is Workflowy. The system that I have to organize my physical notes and to track my activities is Bujo. But also with a mix of commonplace and all of the other things. I do take lengthy notes, I do break it down, I summarize. There's a healthy mix of all of these things, and that's why I'm still finding it difficult to explain exactly what I'm doing. But I summarized it. I follow the GTD framework to organize my goals and what I'm supposed to be doing. I use the Workflowy app to keep me on track, to manage that particular system. That's the project management system. My knowledge management system is something that I'm still building, but currently I'm in the process of shifting from Evernote to Obsidian, mostly because Evernote has gotten too greedy and it's giving way too little and asking for way too much. Even the app is incredibly laggy, and it's sad that I have to move away, but it's come to this. So I am. The good thing about Workflowy and Obsidian is that they are local. There is an option for you to connect to the cloud, but it's primarily local, and that's brilliant. So, yes, I think we've covered a decent amount. We're hitting the 40-minute mark, which is incredible because I've just been sitting in front of the mic and going off on controlled tangent after controlled tangent. And I'd like to credit all of this incredible control of tangency to my journaling practice. I've been able to streamline my thoughts. I've been able to sit and focus. And I've been able to keep my thoughts on track thanks to the clarity I've gotten from journaling. And we'll talk about that more as I understand exactly what is happening. I do want to give you a little bit of the science behind why writing things down with like physically as opposed to typing. I'd like to explain why that is more beneficial to you, and I'd like to understand more of that from a scientific perspective myself before I talk about it. But I can give you anecdotal evidence from my end talking about how beneficial it's been for me. And it has been incredibly beneficial, dude. I mean, you can see the clarity in thought. You can see the clarity in my speech. Of course, the clarity in speech also comes from the fact that I've been doing this for nearly 54 episodes, and now it's 55. We're gonna hit 100 episodes by the end of this year. That's the goal. I mean, I might be hitting 100 episodes next year, but it's okay. That's alright. It's completely fine. I'm just gonna work on putting together a system to manage my productivity. I'm gonna fine tune the entire thing. I'm gonna use it for my creativity as well. I need something to manage the chaos of YouTube. And I think I've finally found my answer on how to manage chaos in my life. And that's by building a system. As to how to build a system, well, we'll talk about that later. Alright? Thank you for joining me today, everybody. It's been a really long time since I got to do this, and I enjoyed every single moment of it. And we'll be doing this a lot more often as time passes. Until next time, Punarmilam, Jai Shri Ram. I will see you on the next episode of the We Are Not Lonely podcast. Over and out. Punarmilam.